Well, spring has officially come and gone. Scott Frost talked to reporters a couple days ago. We're going to go through some of his comments that we found interesting, as well as talk about some of the players that have entered the portal for the Knights. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. Well, it is officially time. We are past spring ball. We are on to summer. And these next couple months are going to be rough. Like I said last week, it's going to be recruiting. It's going to be right now the transfer portal is active. A couple players that UCF's going after. We're going to talk about one of them towards the end of the show. And then we'll also talk about some of the players that have entered since last episode. Like I said, not too many that we were expecting, but some nonetheless. As always, Nick Geddes joins me. Nick, how are we doing? We're going to talk a lot of Scott Frost today and some of his comments in his first spring back into college football, but definitely, I think by all accounts, a positive spring for the Knights.
Yeah, everybody had a great spring. Everything was positive. Everything was jumpy. Everything was just great. I mean, that's usually what you hear out coming. Nobody's going to just say, yeah, we're just miles off it or anything. But I thought there was some interesting tidbits listening to Coach Frost speak this past weekend. And, spring practice, it's like there's all that build up to we finally get to see everybody in uniform and in pads and everything. And then before you know it, you blink and it's over. And we are very close. We are inching closer and closer, Sean, to the doldrums of the college football offseason, which I'm not looking forward to. You're not looking forward to. I don't think any of us are looking forward to. But before you know it, August will be here. And I'm counting down the days till we get there. But some interesting stuff to jump into today, nonetheless.
Yeah, and I'll give Scott Frost this. I mean, he gives long-winded answers, which I like. And you really do feel like he speaks his mind, and
he's not trying to sell me on anything, is he?
No, which I think is not necessarily a negative, but it's also not a positive.
Any taglines, any slogans that we're going with?
No. It seems like the UCF Fast and Fierce is kind of like people are really pushing for that to take the cake. We
can leave it in the past.
But I would rather, I
want to leave all slogans in the past.
Yeah, let's come in with a clean slate. But Scott Frost talked last Saturday, so it's been almost a week, and that's the last time we will hear from Scott Frost until fall, I believe, depending on what they've got going on. But he said some interesting stuff, and not so much interesting in terms of a starting quarterback or a defensive scheme or anything like that. But it was interesting kind of getting into the mind of Scott Frost of what he's felt these last couple months, especially in terms of transfer portal and how he views that, how he thinks the team did in spring. And I kind of want to start on that, Nick. His comment that he made is we've got a lot of work in. I think we worked the guys harder than they're used to, and we got a lot better, which is what you want in spring. Maybe I'm reading between the lines here, and I know there's a lot of work to do. He made that a point. Like he said, this was a 4-8 football team, even though he did say they could have won more. So he's setting the expectation of this is not a one-year rebuild where we're coming in and we're going to win now. We could. This team they could have, but they didn't. They won 4 games. I told you the first day that I saw in practice when they were running from each end of the field to each end, I'm like, this didn't feel like a Gus Malzahn practice. It felt very different. Do you kind of take that comment as maybe a little dig when he says, I think we worked the guys harder than they're used to? Do you think they kind of realized quickly, and maybe some players told them, I don't know, that this was the hardest spring I've had, or this was one of the tougher springs I've had, and Scott Frost knew that they were going to have to work them an extra bit harder, given the record last year and given bringing in an entirely new coaching staff?
I mean, for sure. I mean, outside of Cam Martin and Sean Beckton, I think every other coach on this staff is brand new. And, he shouted out those 2 coaches in particular for helping him during the transition process. And and being like the middleman to the older players and some of the newer players that came in. But that's the other part of it, is they had so many new players that come in. You have a coach that comes in to a college football landscape that is a lot different than what it was, 3 years ago, the last time that he was on a sideline. So it's just a lot of new, and it's all moving really fast. He mentioned the fact that his family is not even down here with him yet, and how much that's tugging on him. So you imagine sitting Scott Frost's shoes for one moment. You get this unexpected opportunity to go back to the place that you love and to have this homecoming. And you're talking to everybody at the media. You're enjoying the fact that you're back in Orlando and the whole whirlwind of that. And then you got players leaving. You got to sign all new players in the portal. And then before you know it, you got to hire coaches. You got to install systems. What are we going to be? What's our identity? What do we want this to all look like? And the man's family is not even here. So I'm sure that's tugging at him, and he admitted that. And that's now what this sort of down period is going to be very helpful for him in his personal life. But from a professional standpoint and what he does, it can't be easy. And they were 4-8 last year. He acknowledged that. And that just is not good enough. And I don't know if I take it necessarily as a dig, more so than fact that, hey, it's cool that I'm here and everything. I know everybody's enjoying this. And, Mackenzie Milton's back as the quarterback coach. And this is all fun, but we got to get down to business now. And the fact of the matter is, this was a 4-8 football team. This team is, I would probably say, less. I don't think this is anything crazy I'm about to say. This is a far less talented team on paper than the one that they had last year, that went 4-8 with a lot of new players, with a lot of inexperience, a lot of guys who maybe were productive at much smaller schools, and now this is a big step up for them. And so they just got a lot of work to get done. And on top of that, you're dealing with another portal that's active at the moment. I think it closes tomorrow at the time we're recording it right now. And it's just a lot of work to get done. So I think he's just trying to convey that point and hit that home to everybody, that we got to understand that, we're trying to build something here. And so he went in. It sounds like they went into spring practice, and he admitted, I threw a lot at them. And when you throw a lot at somebody at once, you're going to have your ups and downs. And it sounds like we had that throughout camp.
Yeah, and you weren't expecting it to be perfect. You were expecting there to be growing pains, especially with a lot of the players, depending on who comes along faster than others. Cam Fancher was a perfect example of that. He came on a little bit faster. I think Scott Frost talked about that, how Cam has the playing experience, so it was kind of easier for him to kind of step in and maybe show a little bit more than the other quarterbacks. You mentioned it, transfer portal. That's really the thing we want to get to today. Now, we're going to discuss, I think, on next week's episode, the players that UCF are bringing in from the transfer portal, the freshmen the UCF have commitments from and are going after. But, he talked a good amount and was asked a good amount about, the Nico situation at Tennessee and, his thoughts on that. And he didn't really give his thoughts on that. But the quote that he gave is, you have a tendency in life to think grass is always greener somewhere else, and usually it's not. When you're 18, 19, 20 years old, and you think money is everything, and it's not. Happiness and success are way more important than that, and I've learned that personally. I'm happy here, and I'm happy to be back here. Sometimes decisions are made for the wrong reasons, but that's life. Hopefully we can try to educate guys, too, as much as we can, and mentor them as much as we can to help them make good decisions. I think he has firsthand knowledge, like he said. He's gone through it where he made a decision, not necessarily based on money. As we know, there was a lot of facets in a certain decision. But I think Scott Frost left the college landscape for a little bit, came back, and is looking at the greater college football world and saying nobody likes the two transfer portal windows. And I don't think anybody does. The only thing it benefits is the players, because they can get up and leave whenever. But to Scott Frost's point, and to many college football fans that are not happy with it either, you're having guys that came in January and are leaving in April. They're just staying for spring and leaving. And that doesn't help most of the players. It doesn't. And grass isn't always greener. You're going to have some guys just wanting to go get a better opportunity. Like Dylan Risk. Yeah, there wasn't really a spot for him. He's going to go try and find that other opportunity. But there's other guys that are maybe starters, thinking, I'm going to go get a bag and I'm going to be just as good, contribute just as much as I was going to, and play just as much. And to Scott Frost's point, the grass isn't always greener. What do you think of his comments there on that? And do you think, again, the approach with Scott Frost on the portal and recruiting freshmen, how much it's going to differ from Gus Malzahn might actually benefit UCF?
I mean, it's certainly going to be different. We were talking about this off air. If you sort of are tracking recruiting right now, and I know we're still early in the process, I think they have 5 guys committed at the moment in their 2026 class. And, the word committed doesn't exactly hold a lot of value now that like it used to. So we'll see who's committed and who really is who ends up signing, right? But what we were saying was, when Gus was here, and Gus basically, when he first got here, talked about it, how they were going to recruit and the whole hair on fire deal. And, it was like a shock to the system, I felt like, as a UCF fan, to see them going after so many 4-star guys and even trying to get into the conversation with some 5-star guys. And, when you're a coach like Gus Malzahn and you were at a very top level program and reached the highs that he did, there was no shot that Gus Malzahn now was going to now I'm just going to start recruiting the lower level guys according to where I'm at. No, he was trying to build this program up and take it to a new level. Didn't happen. He gave us some of the higher recruiting classes the highest recruiting classes that we've ever seen in UCF. But I think as we've talked about, not to rehash everything, the development didn't exactly take off the way that it probably should have. And we sit here today in the situation we're in. But I don't think Scott Frost has the luxury of what Gus Malzahn did. And as we get further into this NIL era, and I think everything that NIL was designed to be has almost become, how do I word this? I mean, I guess you could just straight up say it's pay for play. I mean, I know Kirk Street has been on record to say that a couple weeks ago when the whole Nico Iamaleava situation happened. And this was him addressing those comments you mentioned were when he was asked about that. But I don't think UCF is in the greatest spot right now to, throw bags at people. I just don't think they have the bag to throw at people, not just in football, but in other sports too. But we're just relating it to football. I think things are going to be a little bit different, and they're going to have to rely on their scouting and trying to find some of these hidden gems, sort of the same way that he was able to do things 7-8 years ago. And now you're just sort of hoping that can that system still pay off in the long run? And even when you get them in, can you keep them in the building? Because what's happening now is like you can go find a hidden gem all you want. But if they become a hit in year 1 or year 2, well, guess what? Their time's going to come where they want money. And UCF is probably not going to be able to be the team to deliver it to them. And they're going to go searching for a different spot to get that. And that's life. I mean, that's not just a college football thing, but that's life. But I think it still has been such a shock to the system, to a lot of these coaches and a lot of these programs. And unless you're one of those foundational programs in college football, it's just a really hard thing to navigate through right now. So I think that's sort of the challenges. And he was speaking to that, and he was pretty honest with it, calling it a nightmare right now and sort of, opening up the curtain a little bit of what it's like. And he's not the first coach to say it, but man, it's, I don't know. It's just the long-term future of this program. It seems to be in a very interesting spot right now because of their situation in NIL at the moment.
Now, here's what I will say to shed maybe some positivity, sprinkle some negativity, but mostly positivity. UCF does have a couple boosters that are basically the boosters for UCF that give all the money and contribute the most. Football is the main sport for UCF. That has been made apparent. The operating budget for teams like the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team, baseball, it's basically non-existent. UCF has given some money to those programs. I think they increased basketball's budget a hair before last season, but it's nowhere near on the level of every other team in the Big 12. Football, UCF gives all the money. So, there are some players on the UCF roster that are making pretty good money. So, it's not necessarily that we're saying UCF has no shot to go after some 4-stars or to go in the portal and grab top guys? I think it's a couple things. And I'm going to read Scott Frost's last comment here that we found interesting. But this is going to be a prove-it year. UCF is not under Gus Malzahn anymore, like Nick said, and we know. This is a Scott Frost team. Scott Frost, in his last season in college football, didn't really leave a good taste in people's mouth. I think certain players that are at UCF kind of know, hey, I have an opportunity to make some noise in this offense. But Scott Frost and the staff are going to have to prove to those top guys, this is the UCF from 2017. This is the UCF team, the UCF Fast. You're going to want to come play here. Come on over. And I'm not disrespecting the kids that UCF's going after. We'll talk next week. There are some guys I'm really excited about, and I think they're really good players. It's just a shock to the system, using Nick's verbiage there. It's a shock to the system when we're used to saying UCF's going after a 4-star tight end, 4-star linebacker, 4-star offensive lineman, 4-star defensive tackle, to this is a 84 overall 3-star. And like we've always said on this show, stars don't matter. At the end of the day, it's about potential. And your potential is only as good when you go on the field and show it. But it is a shock when you look in the portal and you're seeing the guys that UCF are going after and like where they're coming from. And then you look at the guys that UCF is recruiting and it's kind of in that same boat. Let's give this last little bit of the NIL demands, because Scott Frost was asked about NIL and having to go into negotiations, even during spring practice. And he said, yes, I don't think anybody's really happy with the situation we're in now, except maybe the institutions that have just unlimited money to spend, and they want to keep that advantage. If people really knew what went on, it's a mess. It's constant negotiation, and it's a bidding war for every single player, whether they're in the portal or not. That's the reality, whether people want to admit it or not. It's a sad state if a sport of it, if it's a sad, Lord have mercy. Sorry, guys. It's a sad state.
Do I need to read it?
I was doing great until then. That it's like a little word soup right there. It's a sad state if a sport as beautiful as college football is won by the people with the richest boosters. That's kind of where we are right now. Hopefully, they're trying to put some guardrails around it. I think it would make the game a better game if there were at least some restrictions and rules in place. And I think we can end here, Nick, and I want to talk about that, but this has been an ongoing issue. And I think for a guy that was in the pros for at least last year or so, months, however much you want to say, but to go out of the game and then come back and say, if people really knew what went on, it's a mess. And me and you hear stuff through back channels about just everything that goes on with NIL and stuff like that. We were hearing stuff not just before last season, but the season before last season, where we're hearing what players were like wanting, getting paid, and then like taking the money and dipping. Like there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people just don't know. So for Scott Frost, I do think it is an eye-opening experience where they're like, have you been in the room and had to like do a on-the-fly negotiation for a player on your roster? And he's like, yeah.
Probably every day.
You could see it on his face. You could see it on his face where he like, this is just different than what I'm used to. And it's definitely a mess.
Yeah, and that was one of my, that was one of my big thing. I don't know if I should call it a concern or just one of my big questions that I had when they decided they were going to go in this direction and bring Scott Frost back. That was the part. And just reading, you're listening to what he said and hearing you say it again, and watching sort of his body language when he was saying it out loud. It does come off like a coach who is, pretty, like he's only like early into this, like 2 portal cycles, and he's pretty much like just, this sucks. Like I don't like doing this whatsoever, but yeah, you just have to. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, you could be the guy that's just shouting from the rooftops like, oh, it needs to be the way it used to be, and why can't we? You can do that, but you'll get left behind further. I mean, that's what'll happen. And there's some element to this conversation it's very nuanced. And like when he says, a sport as beautiful as college football won by the people with the richest boosters. I mean, which programs are on top of college football? I mean, it's the Georgias, it's the Texas, the Ohio State, the Notre Dame, and so on. I mean, these are the same schools. No matter what system you have in place, these schools are always going to be near the top. Like that's there, that part element is into it. But again, those are the foundational programs. Those programs have been successful for a long time. You know, those fan bases and the boosters of those schools, they're lining up like crazy because they live this. And if they go 5-7 or 4-8, heads roll at those programs differently than they do at this one, right? So that's like why this is such a nuanced conversation. And it's not like there's like one right answer on how to fix this, but just speaking to like where they're at right now in the Big 12, I look at a program like Texas Tech, and Texas Tech in particular this year in football and basketball, they seem to be working with the biggest budget maybe in the entire conference at the moment. Is that fair to say?
That's fair.
That's fair. I mean, Colorado, we'll see what happens now going forward. They're going to obviously they're going to be near the top because of what they have there. BYU is another one that's always going to be able to compete. And you just saw this year what they were able to pull off. Probably Arizona State, but I don't think UCF is anywhere near those schools and what they can do. So like, I think Texas Tech is in a spot, just comparing them. Texas Tech has the ability to go and get 5, 6, 7, 8 guys, pay them, top level dollar to come play for them. I think UCF probably is in a spot where they can pay one guy, but can they build a roster that way? No. And I think if you look at the portal acquisitions this year, I think that sort of bears that out. Who's the top receiver you just go to a skill position, go to receiver. Who's the top receiver they brought in the transfer portal this year?
I think they're all even. There's not like a top guy.
But the guy that you're hearing the most buzz about right now is probably DJ Black. He came from Limestone, Division II college. We didn't even know what that was. It's just a different ball game that UCF is having to navigate through right now than some of the other programs that are in their own conference that aren't even near what the schools in the SEC and the Big Ten can offer. So it's a weird time right now, but that's why finding those hidden gems, making sure that you're developing these guys, making sure you're fostering, and he mentioned this, fostering a culture that guys want to be around and they want to be in this building and they feel like they can be successful and get developed the right way. That's what they have to do. There's just no other option.
There's not. And hopefully, again, I think, like I said, I don't give it a year. I'm not taking a lot of stock into it right now because I think ultimately staff had to come in and fill out a roster in general, and they are recruiting late. I care more about the 2027 class to see what they can do. But right now it is this weird time where it's everybody's having to deal with it. Not just UCF, but everybody.
And the top programs, by the way, are benefiting from the system. They're not, and they basically run the sport now.
Yep.
And they're not going to be shouting at the rooftops like, "Yeah, we really should change this, guys."
No,
not going to happen.
No, they don't care. All right, before we close it out, let's talk about the system and UCF going into the transfer portal. We obviously talked about Dylan Risk transferring, and we said that UCF's going to have to add a quarterback. They're going to just have to add a guy to the room, especially to be safe. And we said they probably want to go younger because right now it's a little bit of an older room. Taven Jackson's been in college football for now 3 years. This will be his 4th year. I think he has still 2 years of eligibility. You got Jakari Brown, same thing. Cam Fancher, another guy, older. Well, it looks like, and I don't know how to say it, Davi Belfort, I'm guessing, is how you say it, but from Virginia Tech, redshirt freshman from Florida, is kind of the guy that UCF looks like they're circling. In high school, he was a 3-time captain, named All-City, All-Conference, and All-Region 3 times, selected the All-State team as a senior. He had 3,100 total yards and 34 touchdowns with a 67% completion rate as a senior. As a junior at Miami's Gulliver Prep, he completed 66% of his passes, had about 2,300 yards of offense, and 16 touchdowns despite only playing 7 games. He started as a freshman at West Palm Beach Cardinal Newman, where he posted an 8-4 record there. He was the nation's number 7 dual threat quarterback and number 9 by ESPN. So, and this was just in the 2024 class. 5'11", small, haven't seen much, Nick. I'm going to look up a lot of tape on Davey. or Davi. But what do you think about this kind of potential ad for UCF in the quarterback room?
I mean, I don't really have like a strong opinion, one way or the other. I mean, I sort of expected that once Dylan hit the portal, they were probably going to add somebody just so they have 4 working quarterbacks in the room. That seems to be the number nowadays, is you want to have 4, roster. I know they have some other guys, but in the room, but they're not going to be guys that, just to be honest, are never going to see the field or anything or really dress. So they probably want to have 4 working quarterbacks, and he gives them an option. Somebody who is still very young, still very green, no college experience, obviously, had a little bit of pedigree coming in as a recruit. He's a Florida kid, so there's an easy selling factor there. You want to come home, you want to sit behind, some 3 veteran quarterbacks and get a lay of the land and see what happens. So, and I think also if you're transferring from Virginia Tech, I mean, there's probably worse destinations to go to than UCF. It keeps you in the Power 4 conversation, obviously. And yeah, you get a chance to sit behind veterans, like I said, and develop. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I probably would expect them, though, at some point to add a 4th quarterback to the mix. But nothing like a player that, like, if he comes in, I don't think he's not going to be like under consideration to start or anything like that.
No, he's young. They could develop him, and you can see what happens. But I think they need to bring in a young guy to just compete and see what happens.
Because that is the other thing. Because Taven this is year 4 of Taven Jackson in college, right?
3 or 4. Yeah, 4. But I think he's got 2 years of eligibility.
Yeah, and then the same goes for Cam.
Cam might have 1. Cam might have 2 or 1. I don't know.
And this is it for Jakari, right?
Might be.
Yeah. So, I mean, add a young guy to the mix.
Yep.
I don't think they have a quarterback yet in the next class either. But obviously that will change.
Yep. All right, guys. Let us know what you think. Again,
we did get a kicker, though. We can't got to show love to the kicker position.
I was going to talk about the kicker next week.
But he literally just signed. He just put it on Twitter.
We'll talk about the kicker next week. We'll talk about the kicker.
I want to go in depth. You never want to let me talk special teams.
No, because I have to watch tape on him.
You got to watch tape of him kicking field goals?
Remember the last guy that committed to us, and we watched the tape and we're like, this guy stinks. And guess what? He decommitted and went somewhere else.
Yeah, you chased him off. That's what happened.
Good. He was not a good field goal kicker. All right, Nick, any final thoughts other than UCF's kicker that just committed?
Yeah, we'll just see what happens. I mean, the portal, again, this is dropping tomorrow, I believe. So that's the day that the portal closes. So we'll see if there's any last-minute surprises, outgoings, incomings, things like that. But other than that, thank you for all the On the Boots coverage that you've been providing for the podcast and for all the listeners. Greatly appreciated. Since you're a one-man band over there in Orlando, and you got your hands on a lot of things at the moment, so greatly appreciated. I'm sure everybody appreciates it as well. And thank you for the listeners. I know this time of the year is a little bit not as interesting, I guess, but we appreciate you guys listening. So thank you.
Yeah, you could say that. You could definitely say that. We do appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all you do. We greatly appreciate it. We will be back next week talking kind of what we were just talking about. All the players that committed or left UCF. I will be going in depth on that. All right, everybody. This has been Charge On. We will see you next week.